For decades, the story was simple. Work hard, save your money, retire at 65. We were promised security, ease, and freedom after a lifetime of work. Now, our reality looks very different.
That leads to a future where you sit around, you watch TV, and you worry about running out of money. Not this golden years thing where you travel.
Somewhere along the way, the standard life path changed while our expectations remained frozen in time.
Everyone knows the problem. They may not know the degree of which things are changing.
Loyalty disappeared, companies stopped building careers, and people stopped believing they'd be cared for in their retirement.
We're having this massive demographic shift.
What happens when old patterns meet new realities? When the way we plan our lives can't keep pace with the way we're actually living them?
The 401k became the emergency fund instead of the retirement fund. The numbers are just not enough, especially if you live 20 or 30 years in retirement.
And when the math stops working, fear becomes the bottom line.
Because everything's so uncertain. Political turmoil, economic turmoil, radical technological change. So basically everyone's freaked out.
So Brian Clark walked away from the old script. After building Copyblogger into a $70 million digital exit strategy, he realized what happens if the system you were sold stops making sense.
You can't just move to another country. And I'm like, most of the time, yes, you can. What you can't do is go get a job. So The key is, do you have portable income?
Now, with Further, he's helping Gen Xers rewrite the next chapter, one that trades retirement myth for adaptation, longevity, and a different kind of wealth.
This isn't living the dream. This is a very practical solution.
It's not lifestyle design. It's not escape. It's the next logical step when the old roadmap no longer takes you to greener pastures.
And then just start preparing, just step by step by step. Do the most important thing that needs to be done today. And 30 days, 60 days, 100 days from now, everything's going to be different.
Everything is changing faster than most people think. The only question left is, what will you do next?
For the Gen Xer, the Zennial who maybe feels trapped on that corporate treadmill, what's the first decision they need to make to take a step into a different direction? Brian, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Right on. You write a lot about adapting to a new reality. Can you explain what that new reality is, and especially for Gen Xers and I would say like Zennials like myself?
So I'm an older Gen Xer. It's kind of interesting how we came along. We're this smaller generation compared to the massive baby boomer generation, and then you came just before the massive millennial generation, and we all make jokes about how we're forgotten and no one pays attention to us. And I think generally we're fine with that, but it's also been this steady progression of the way things were changes right when we step up to bat at that particular thing, right? And so, we went from stay-at-home moms with the baby boomer generation to being the first kind of latchkey kids because moms went to work. And then as we got into the job market, they called us slackers and we had no ambition, when really we just didn't want to follow in the footsteps of the people who came before us. But we were actually supposed to be the first generation that didn't do as well as our parents. They say that about every generation. I don't know if you know this or not.
No.
But we believed it. Like I graduated right into a recession in the early 90s. And but then this thing called the internet came along and we jumped all over that. Even though we were analog kids, we figured out digital, and some of the most evil companies in the world now are started by Gen Xers, unfortunately. But the we don't understand technology thing is kind of out the window. The 401k replaced pensions starting around 1978, but really accelerating during Reagan's years in the 80s. That kind of just changed the entire concept of staying with one employer, getting the gold watch and a pension, being taken care of when you retired. But even adding more to that is the fact that not everyone, but a lot of baby boomers and Gen Xers are going to live quite a bit longer than people used to live. when we thought of 65 as retirement age. Combined with that, we're an aging society, older people living longer, massively dropping birth rates. You can't escape hearing about that story. So we're having this massive demographic shift. The world is changing. Hopefully it catches up to the fact that older people are healthier, living longer, meaning working longer, spending longer. This is the entire thesis of what's known as the longevity economy. Just a massive amount of money is concentrated in the hands of people over 50. And yet Madison Avenue focuses on Gen Z. And I always like to say the only money Gen Z has is the money I give my kids. I think we're all supporting our kids to some degree, right? So again, we're coming up on the stage of life where historically you're supposed to be, you're in the prime of your career, prime earning years, socking away enough money so you can stop working at 62, 65, whatever, it's 67 officially for us with Social Security. And the rates of savings, because we were in charge of our own savings, and we have a vehicle where if there's a financial crisis, where are you going to go? You dip into the 401k. So the 401k became the emergency fund instead of the retirement fund. And I think that is reflected in the numbers of the numbers are just not enough, especially if you live 20 or 30 years in retirement. You just, so that leads to a future where you sit around, you watch TV, and you worry about running out of money. Not this golden years thing where you travel and you got the grandkids. I mean, that retirement, I think Bradley Sherman, I don't know if you know who he is, but he studies demographic change, wrote a book called Super Agers. He basically said AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons, really should stand for American Association of Rich People, because that's the only people who could live that kind of, and even wealthy people are worried about running out of money because everything's so uncertain, right? You have political turmoil, economic turmoil, radical technological change with AI, quantum computing. Who knows what's next, right? So basically everyone's freaked out. And I have a feeling things will sort themselves out over the next 5-10 years. But for Gen Xers, that's exactly the wrong time to get laid off. But people who are out of work are not finding jobs. And I know, family members and friends who are in this position. And it's just the most demoralizing thing in the world. My message is, I've been calling myself unemployable pretty much my entire adult life because I just wouldn't trust working for an employer under any circumstances. But I'd say it's especially precarious right now. So that's what I'm trying to help people with. I think everyone knows the problem. They may not know the degree of which things are changing, but they know that they can't trust their employer to take care of them.
Yeah. So that old script, right? As you say, work hard, save money, retire at 65
Exactly.
is done, right? Is broken. I think you laid out a good case as to why that is. When did you personally start to realize this? And then, and then how did that shift the choices that you made?
It's an interesting story because I've been an entrepreneur. I started my first company in 98. I had a lot of success starting around 2007. Actually sold my company in 2018. So technically I can retire. I could have retired at 52. I have no interest in retiring. So that's the other side of it. It's not just the economic thing. There's this whole unretirement movement started by the baby boomers who have more money than any generation around right now. And they retired and they're like, this is boring. And I lack purpose. I have no meaning. I don't have the social connections I had with work. I'm going back to work. And if they can't get, traditional employment, then they're starting businesses. The entrepreneurial explosion of people in their 50s and 60s is remarkable. And the cool thing about it is we're more successful than younger people. at it, which is counterintuitive because we all have the picture of Mark Zuckerberg in a hoodie, and that was the prototypical tech entrepreneur. But the average successful tech entrepreneur is 45. And people in their 50s and 60s are starting all sorts of different businesses just because they have the experience, they've got the connections, they've got, some money that they can buffer themselves with. So my realization was learning about the longevity economy after multiple people after the sale of the company said, "Are you going to retire?" And I just laughed. I'm like, "No, I mean, I'll end up in a Mexican prison if I retire because I will be bored and get in trouble." It never occurred to me to retire. And I don't know what your thoughts are, but if you love the work you do, and I designed my work so that I would, I used to be an attorney and I hated that. So I said, I could not live my life this way. I would have been miserable the entire time, no matter how much money I made. And, the statistics on, again, lack of purpose, levels of depression, especially among men after retirement, the suicide rates. I mean, it's really a dark side, and I hate going there. But retirement's just not all it's cracked up to be. And I'm just happy to try to help spread that word, because you come in with, okay, you're not going to be able to retire. And most Gen X's are like, yeah, well, what's new? I'll just suck it up and I'll work till I die. And I'm like, well, hey, hold on. Let's think about this a little differently. Maybe you don't want to retire. Maybe this isn't terrible, and that's the positive aspect I try to bring to further. And it's all data based. It's not just my opinion or what Brian wants to do. This is the way it is. And then you have this entire explosion of people of all ages who are able to start solo businesses, use tools like automation and AI to augment themselves. And it's a golden time to start your own thing. It's a terrible time to be an older person with a job.
Interesting. There's a lot there. Just to go back, when you asked me, you don't know if what my thoughts are on it, on retirement and stuff. To be perfectly honest with you, I'm 42. I haven't really thought too much about it. And for me, it's just, it doesn't seem like something, the complete stop working completely and then, live this life where, I see it here. I live in Belize. I'm in a quite expat foreigner like centric area, and there's a lot of retirees. And I don't know, I don't necessarily envy if I post this into my local community, I don't know what they're going to respond to here, but I don't necessarily envy like how they live. A lot of them don't really do anything but kind of sit around and drink and smoke, and that's not really my cup of tea or my like vision. If I think of retirement, that's not really what I'm thinking. And perhaps now living here by the beach, I kind of realize that, it's not a perfect existence either here. And so like to have that as your goal, I'm going to retire, buy a property by the beach and then go live there. That's also maybe less appealing to me now that I sort of live partially in that world.
Well, the thing is, you're going to be just as sharp at 62 as you are at 42, except you're going to have even more experience. And so you may have the feeling, because you're an entrepreneurial type, that why would I stop now? I'm just really good at this and I'm going to continue doing it. Now, we have all these other factors. What's the world going to look like in 20 years? We don't know. We just have to do the best we can. But yeah, so I'm still working. But to me, my unretirement is the fact that my wife and I travel. We're 6 months in Baja Sur. We're going to spend 3 months in Costa Rica. We're eyeing the digital nomad visa in Croatia. I'm trying to make sure Europe is a little nuts, but the whole world is nuts, but we just try to make smart decisions about where we go and just try to experience the best of it. It's almost like you can't predict what's going to happen. I was talking to my wife about this. You like, where do you want to live? Well, there's problems here and there's problems there. There's going to be problems of some sort everywhere. And so I flipped it on its head, not being morbid, but I was like, where would you want to die? Like, your obituary says you died in, oh my God, like in Dallas, Texas, or or at the base of the Alps in France after tumbling down on a poorly stepped, hiking move. I mean, I'll go for that every time.
Have you do you follow Elizabeth Inc. on Substack? So she does these. She was a guest of mine like a few episodes ago, and she does these should you move to? And I believe, I don't know if she's done Croatia, but she did Albania. And I looked into Albania, and it looks beautiful there.
Yeah.
And I believe I've
heard good things recently about Albania. Anyway, that's what we do. We go and check places out. If you fall in love with it, maybe you stay. If you don't, you move on and go somewhere else. And I think, for a little while, going places, revisiting places we've been, like, Grenoble, France, which is where I was alluding to at the base of the Alps, and then other places that we haven't been. To me, that's the greatest life in the world, but that doesn't mean I want to stop working. So I have to have a portable business, but that's okay. My business has been location independent since 2006.
Oh wow!
Well,
so you're
before I could,
you're like an OG digital nomad,
right? Except I was raising young kids, and we even wish now that we would have taken our kids and just gone and lived somewhere else, but we didn't do that. So now, but they did travel a lot, just not as much for extended periods. But yeah, if I had to do it over, I might take them to wherever, Spain, France, Costa Rica, what have you.
Yeah, we're considering kids are getting a bit older. We tried to do some traveling in Mexico, and it was a little bit of a shit show. The kids were pretty young, and we had two dogs with us.
We took the kids around the world in 2018, 2019 after the acquisition, and they were both teenagers. And they didn't appreciate it, and they missed their friends, and blah, 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 blah. And now they're 20 and 23, and they're like, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I'm like, wish you had that attitude at the time. But what are you going to do with teenagers? It's just something you have to live through. You just got to hold on, make it through those teenage years.
Well, that's a good tip. We'll be sure to get our travel in before then, because we got like a decade before that happened. So
yeah, okay, good.
And then I just another thing too about the retirement is, again, I haven't really thought too much about it, and I guess part of it is I just changed careers when we moved to Belize. I was a contractor, and I became essentially a remote content writer, and so now my focus right now is just
when you say contractor, what do you mean? Construction?
I was a general contractor, in home renovation.
Okay. Wow.
So it was very boots on the ground job, but it's nothing you could take with you.
Right.
And so my focus now is building my current, career. So thinking about retirement is just not on my radar.
Yeah, definitely not even on your mind at this point.
No. So the key here then is to adapt, right? Is to face these changes. And so for someone in midlife, what is that like? Is that a physical thing? Is that, moving to a different location, or is it more of just a mindset shift?
Oh, I think it's all of that. There are different degrees to which, especially what's going on in the United States, location independence may have gone from a perk to a necessity for a lot of people. And we hear, more people than ever, it's astounding, say they want to leave the country. Some people have more urgency than others, people who may be targeted for their gender, their race, their beliefs, but it's a fairly common desire. But as you know, actually doing it is another step entirely. So that is part of my prescription, if you will. But I really leave the political stuff out of it because we decided to do this well before. When we went on that trip around the world, we were going to go back home. The standard practice, we lived in Boulder, Colorado, buy a bigger house, get a fancier car, all of that stuff after the sale of the company. And instead, we downgraded cars, kept the same house, and said, as soon as the kids are on their own and stable, then this is what we're going to do. And it was only until we just left July 1st. So we had plenty of time. Our son ended up going to University of Colorado in Boulder. So we stayed an extra year and a half, which I wouldn't trade for anything. You got to be flexible even in your adaptation. But by the time this summer came around, we were both like, it's time to go for many reasons. But we don't really talk about it from a political standpoint. The thing that holds people back and keeps them tied to jobs is healthcare. And healthcare is a completely different ballgame outside the United States. I don't even think, I need to write about it even more because you could have major things happen and pay out of pocket, and it'll be less than you pay in premiums in the United States if you were self-employed, right? Which is outrageous. So that's a big issue. Lower cost of living. I mean, if you go to expat areas, it is very easy to spend just as much as you did in the United States. So you have to be intentional about that, but it's way doable. That's why so many older people now, actually retired people, left the United States and retired abroad because there's no way they could afford it. There are people who live on their Social Security in some locations. Try doing that actually in the United States. It's impossible, even though that's what it was designed for, right?
Yeah.
So, there's just been this whole idea for a few decades now about the sovereign life. And it started out as some libertarian fantasy, but that the internet was going to make it possible and that borders were going to become less, meaningful. And I think we're seeing that happen. But it's got to be something that you prepare for. You don't just up and move. The people online, you see this, I'm sure, right? You can't just move to another country. And I'm like, most of the time, yes, you can. What you can't do is go get a job in another country. That's the hard part. So the key is, do you have portable income, right? You don't have to be independently wealthy. You just have to be able to work from your laptop, the whole digital nomad fantasy. But I'm just saying now, this isn't living the dream. This, to me, is a very practical solution. Just start your own business, make it location independent, either travel around or choose a place with a cost of living that fits your abilities. And then start looking around once you live somewhere else. I don't know what it's like for you in Belize, but you're probably looking around even with your contractor background and looking at real estate or development that's happening, and you get ideas, you start to understand how things work, right? That's what I call being an untourist. If you spend at least 3 months in a place, you start to figure it out in a way that a tourist never does. And if you stay longer, obviously, that escalates.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. One thing I decided not to do here was go into contracting. Mainly,
what's the construction level like down there?
It's pretty amazing what they do with concrete here with like pretty rudimentary technology. There's not like although they do have pump trucks and stuff like that, but they don't have like the big vibrators for smoothing out concrete, so everything then gets parged over. It's probably similar to like what you see in Mexico, and they're still using they're using bush stick poles to do their form work and stuff like that. So it is pretty impressive what they can do. And then there's some wood frame construction and stuff like that here as well. But mainly it was for me here in Belize. It's a small country. It's only 400,000 people, and there's certain industries here, that construction being one of them, and real estate is another one, and property management is another one, that kind of a lot of foreigners come here and take the jobs, and those are
Right.
kind of
It's
some of the more
definitely that way.
lucrative. And I just didn't feel right about doing that, especially given how small the country is. I feel like the local people got to be building it themselves, and I didn't want to contribute to that issue, man. It's a closed loop, right? Because then people come here, they get a foreign real estate agent who then, sells the property and then introduces them to the property manager who's a foreigner and the contractor who's a foreigner, and then it just keeps this like closed loop and boxes out the actual local people. And it's just I didn't
swear every gringo in Cabo is a realtor. I mean,
yeah. What is is it like a regulated industry? Like it isn't here, so anyone can just be like, I'm a real estate agent one day.
No, it is regulated. I don't know what the process is, but generally an American will have to join a Mexican firm, and there are testing and it's not the Wild West. But that's all anyone can think of to do, which is, I guess, makes sense. But yeah, we're not in Cabo. We're up the coast from there. But it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I just feel like that approach kind of just lacks a little bit of creativity. Like if you're going to come to a place like Belize, like start a company here that like nobody else is doing, or that's going to benefit the country and the people and stuff.
That's what I'm talking about, right? Like we don't need to bring hyper commercialism or hyper consumerism to these other countries. I mean, for me, that's what I'm trying to get away from. But you will see a need, a service that works, or products that people want in the United States, not the ridiculous, hyper convenience, but just a gap in the market that in the United States we do this. I bet that would work here. That I think can be beneficial if you can actually serve the Belize people or the Mexican people as well. Although, again, in expat areas, there are establishments that wouldn't exist if there weren't a bunch of gringos around, because you're giving them what they were used to back home. So, I mean, there are different ways to approach it. But like you said, I like a more creative observational approach, which is what entrepreneurism is, as opposed to, I'll just sell real estate.
Yeah, I'll just do the easy thing.
It's not even easy because there's so much competition.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah. Okay, so for the Gen Xer, the Zennial who is listening, who maybe feels trapped on that corporate treadmill, what's like the first decision they need to make to take a step into a different direction?
I guess really the first step is to recognize that your company has no loyalty to you, and you probably don't have much for them either. And yet you probably have more because you have the illusion of security and you've got that steady paycheck, and that's something that you're willing to trade, being told what to do or what have you. But that's an illusion. And I think almost everyone knows that now, right? This millennial generation is under no illusions. But I still think you get lulled into, it's not going to be me. And as uncomfortable as it is, I think everyone should have the mindset of, it not only could be me, it's probably going to be me. And just like you prepare for a natural disaster, right? You have a go bag, or you have enough bottled water and provisions or whatever. And yet people don't prep to be laid off, even though it happens on a regular basis, every time there's a financial meltdown or even just a recession. Now, I don't know if we're headed towards recession or a meltdown, but it doesn't look good. Everything's kind of in bubble insanity land. The stock market looks exactly like it did when I started out as an entrepreneur in the dot-com era. I was not financially sophisticated. They're saying the rules of economics no longer apply. I'm like, maybe that's true. And then I started looking a little closer. I'm like, no, this is bullshit. And then it all fell apart, right? So now you look and you'll see analysts saying, well, the old rules don't apply. This is postmodern, all tied to AI. AI changes everything. No, it's another bubble. AI is not going to play out in the short term in a way that rewards all this money that's been thrown at it. So we're going to have a pop. Now, I just don't know what's going to happen when that happens. But you got to kind of think, okay, I could lose my job, and then just start preparing. This is the age of the side hustle. And I'm not saying drive an Uber or DoorDash. I'm saying start your side hustle while you got a paycheck, little bit by little bit, work on it a little bit each evening, on the weekends. You don't have to kill yourself, but just step by step by step. I mean, my whole philosophy of productivity is do the most important thing that needs to be done today. And 30 days, 60 days, 100 days from now, everything's going to be different. You will have created something new. You will have done whatever your objective is, right? So that's what I advise people to do. I'm certainly not telling people to quit their job. I just don't want people to be in the position of being laid off, panicked, and they're back against the wall. Like some people really do well with their back against the wall. I've been there a couple times. I'm pretty good under pressure, but a lot of people aren't. And I wouldn't want to be under that pressure right now at my age. I'm much better with thinking ahead and being prepared than I am about doing all-nighters. I need sleep, man. That's important.
I still do that a bit. I do like late nights with this podcast editing and stuff like that. It's like the only opportunity I really get to do it.
You do what you have to do, but you don't want to burn out and you don't want to be freaked out because you don't think correctly.
Yeah. But I really enjoy the work. So even if I'm getting 5 hours of sleep, that actually makes a big difference, I find, because it's not like it was a slog doing it. You actually enjoyed doing it and the time kind of flew by. And that's why you're like, oh crap, it's 1 a.m. I should go to bed.
And that's the key. Like that. Do something. Yeah. I mean, I don't think most people actually want to retire. They want to stop doing the crap they're doing now and do something they enjoy, so that's really the message, but you have to make an intentional decision to do that. And the good news is you're at the right age with the right technology tools to be successful at a rate better than at any time in the history of the world. So when you look at it, that I know I'm trying to sound optimistic, and I really am, but it's only if people believe it themselves and internalize it and act on it. And you can't make that happen. You can, which is you want to just like grab people and go, do this.
So the old script is failing. Adaptation is the sort of the new norm. And you have your further strategy, which sort of kind of brings this all together. And you were just kind of briefly touching on it earlier. So we have expertise monetization, location independence, strategic relocation, and timeline rebellion. Where does the expertise come in to play? So like someone like, say, for me, and this is actually, I've been thinking more about this, after reading your work, and it's been a challenge for me to like bring in my past experience in construction into this new kind of career that I've chosen for myself. So for someone like in my position who's transitioning from like a physical or like a fixed place job into something that's more location independent, what's one way or practical step that someone can like leverage their experience?
Well, there's two different types of people, you being one type, and then the person who has expertise perhaps in a corporate setting or a business setting working for someone else, and then they go out to freelance or consult. And then the entire business of expertise, as I call it, is much more expansive than just client services, right? Substack is a great example. You can You can have a first tier product, which is basically the paid Substack that educates people more. And the little known secret is those people become better clients than the people who you just kind of take off the street, right? Who have a problem and they contact you to solve it. So there's that level of someone where you're continuing with the expertise that you developed over decades. And the issue with them is you've got to convince them what you do is valuable. If a company has been paying you for this, then odds are people are going to pay you for this as well. You may have to reposition yourself, and this is a lot what we talk about, but you have marketable skills. Then there's the person, and this is very common in your late 40s or early 50s, where you just have a complete shift in values and you don't want to do what you've been doing. You realize you were doing that for money the whole time, or status, or to make your parents happy, or to make, it was socially approved, whatever. We do all sorts of crazy stuff when we're young because we're supposed to. And I hate that word more than anything, supposed to. But I went to law school because I was supposed to, right? Mm-hmm. I practiced for 5 years and hated it because I was supposed to. But I stopped doing what I was supposed to. And that was the best decision of my life. I can't sugarcoat it. But anyway, so you get this, and this is why so many people talk about midlife reinvention, because you have this urge to be different. You're not burning down the house, but you are shifting gears. And that's what I see you have done, just a little ahead of schedule, which is, I don't want to do this contracting thing anymore. I want to try something else. Now, this type of expertise development this is the encouraging thing about it. The type of marketing that we have to do to build an expertise-based business is an exercise in demonstrating expertise in itself. Even if you're just 1 week ahead of your audience, you're learning, you're sharing, and when you share what you've learned, this is the actual key to true knowledge acquisition. It's not reading the textbook 5 times. It's taking the test. The test is actually what causes you to remember, the recall. So the way people have studied when I was younger was probably not the best, but then as time moved on, people who use things like practice tests, flashcards, all that kind of anything that causes you to recall the information is causing it to be cemented within your brain in a real way. So we have to create content to build audiences. And to do that, we have to have expertise, and we're sharing it. And often I'll read something. Now, I've been doing this a long time, but when I started, I was always educating myself in the process as I went along. There is a person who runs a newsletter. Her name is Caitlin. It's called Why We Buy. And I love that she said this out loud, because this is true of all these gurus and creators and all these people that we all think we can't become. She said, you know what, when I put out a newsletter issue, I wasn't an expert on buyer psychology. It's like I learned it a week or two ahead, and then I wrote about it. And that was her process. And that is perfectly legit. That's what authors do, like Dan Pink, Malcolm Gladwell. They learn about a topic, they explain it in a easy to understand way, and then they go give $100,000 speeches to corporations based on the book they wrote, right? No one is an imposter. This is not imposter syndrome. You may feel it, but this is how everyone does this. This is the business of maybe just-in-time expertise, right? Mm. Now, as you go through this process and you do this for 2 years, you're a legit expert. There's no more, fake it till you make it. You are legitimately an expert, but it was the process of sharing and teaching others that made that happen, not because you read 5 books. You got to read the books maybe, but you got to share what you've learned. So for you, I don't think you're going to have any problem because you just jumped right into it and you're sharing what you know. And I would imagine you're continuing to learn as you go, so that you're not only cutting edge, but you're deepening your own expertise. So that's my answer. Either you leverage your existing decades of expertise in a way that pays you more and gives you more freedom, or if you want to develop new expertise, you've got to start and you got to do it in public or it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, one thing, like for me, I've just sort of tried to, I'm leveraging the skills that I learned, even though they're not like the same. Like I'm not taking like physical construction skills, but I'm taking like the business skills and just the skills like I guess what is it, like heuristic skills, like knowing how to learn and how to like teach myself. I'm not sure if that's the right term actually, but and like that actually is like that bridges the gap for me, right? So it's like when I was in construction, I would have to like learn new construction processes and new materials and that kind of stuff, and then install them. Here, I'm just learning new tools and processes and producing a different type of product. It's a digital product opposed to like a physical product, but I'm still like creating, and there's still like a process in which you can teach yourself and produce, based on what you've learned. So
yeah, it really comes down to learning, relearning, and sometimes unlearning can be the most crucial step, where again, we're in this stage where you have to unlearn the path or the playbook that people followed before us because it just doesn't work anymore. It doesn't, it's no longer relevant. And right now, at least at the mass media level, all I really see is Gen X retirement crisis. They're not talking enough about how this is part of a bigger thing. And while it does take adaptation, Gen X has been adapting our entire lives. So I love the spirit that my fellow Gen Xers have. They're like, yeah, well, shit changes all the time. We just adapt and we'll be all right. See, I love that attitude because if you don't have that, you're dead in the water. Like sitting at home and crying about it is not an appropriate solution at all. So I really try to emphasize that. Look at the bigger picture. This is an opportunity here. I mean, there is a lot of stuff changing. And when things are disrupted, there's opportunity for entrepreneurs. And get started now and learn how to spot this stuff.
Okay. So our theoretical person, I guess, has spotted the change and is making the shift. So now they've decided, okay, I don't necessarily need to live where I currently live. And you like to use a term called slow mad, or you've used a term called slow mad. How does that like differ from just digital nomad?
Yeah. So I didn't make that term up. I heard someone else use it. But the definition of slow mad that I stole is that, you live in a place for at least 3-6 months, maybe even longer, but you still don't intend to just be there. Like, as far as I can tell, you intend to be in Belize, at least for the near future, or?
Yeah, we own we have a home here. So we've discovered it's a bit of like, it is a bit of an anchor because we are considering like doing some more traveling and stuff. And we're just like, okay, well, what do we do with this house? And right. So
I think the slow mad approach is really about trying out places long enough to say, could I live here? Do I want to live here? And then, because eventually we're going to want that to find a place. We just don't know. But we do know enough to know that 2 weeks isn't going to tell you anything. All that's going to do is give you a rosy impression of a place that you don't really understand.
Yeah.
Like, I've been coming to Cerritos Beach for years, for 1 or 2 weeks. And now I've lived here 3 months and I know everything. I know where all the bodies are buried. I know all the problems. I know good stuff that I didn't know about. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
The difference. And so that's what I mean by using that term. And again, I saw someone else using it and I'm like, that makes sense. I I see the objective. It's not just to move around. It's like a tryout or an audition for a location. And then you spend 3 months, you like it, you go back, go back again and see if you like it for 6 months. And maybe you find your next home base. I think we'll always travel, but having a place that you call home will eventually, I think, become important. It's amazing to me because I thought my wife would be much more insistent on finding home. And she's like, no, let's just keep moving. I love this. I'm like, okay.
Right on, right on. What's the biggest misconception people have then about running a business from anywhere?
The old laptop on the beach thing, no one is bringing their laptop on the beach. You're going to get sand in your keyboard. It's a nightmare. You really have to work. At my stage with my business right now, I've been doing it a long time. I have a decent audience. I basically get up fairly early and I work until 1 or 2. And then, I go to the beach, I work out, we have dinner. I don't work at night. If something goes off the rails, then you do what you have to do, right? But my general work life to me is very mentally stimulating, gives me a sense of purpose. It funds our travel, and that's what I'm looking for, and this is the type of business I'm advocating for, because if you do have expertise or you have the ability, like you said, to learn and express what you've learned, then it's a really great life. But I'm not here saying, you're just sitting under an umbrella, typing out a few words, or that you can just push a button with AI and have content that actually matters to people, because that's not true. And I can't say that. But compared to a corporate job, man, it doesn't even compare at all.
So then how does strategic relocation come into the, fit into the 4 strategies?
Well, I use the word strategic there because, you don't just go to Canada because the United States is in trouble. You choose what place is best for you. And that could be a range of issues, from climate to language to healthcare. There's a bunch of variables. This isn't just, unless you have to, this isn't about just running away. It's about choosing the collection or bundle of variables that fit. A lot of people don't want to move somewhere where they have to learn Spanish, or, I think it's important to learn another language, especially at my age. It's very, very good cognitively, right? It opens up an entire different world to you when you can learn to think in another language, which is a pretty advanced milestone. But if you can get there, you have literally changed your brain and your worldview. And you can also communicate with how many people in the world speak Spanish? I think it's second only to English, right? But if you just refuse to do that, you can, move to somewhere like Ireland where they sort of speak English.
Believe.
I'm joking. Australia, I learned the language. It was tough, but I'm like, what did you say, mate?
Yeah, well, that's like here, right? They have Creole, which is like,
yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like based in English, but it is not. It's definitely its own thing. But
well, that's kind of like going to Louisiana and you're like, excuse me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they have a Creole or something there too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you can figure it out, right? It's close enough.
Yeah.
But now they've got the new AirPod 3s that have translation. So now, everyone's like, use AI, you stop thinking, you become dumb. I think there's some worry of that. And now we have the ability to just have someone's speech go from French to English in our ears.
Yeah, that's
but
crazy.
you still need to be able to speak back, So I'm just a big advocate for getting out of your comfort zone, learning a new language. If your dream is to go to France, learning French is part of the experience. You can't, set that part aside. But anyway, strategic relocation is where you take all of that into account and choose where you want to go, and then give it a tryout. Don't go buy a house somewhere. Wait.
Yeah.
Well, you can, but
that's
not
what I
right
did.
away.
No, I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, because like I said, we're finding that it is like a little bit of an anchor now that we want to do a little bit more traveling and stuff like that, right? It's just something else you got to
stability
consider
right away, and that there's something to be said for that. So you've probably made it through the transition period, and you're like, okay, I feel good with everything. I didn't necessarily need to own this house, but whatever.
Yeah, we
sure
had two young kids, so it was definitely like it was like a comfort thing to like come here and know that we had our own home with our kids totally and our dogs and like, right. And we kind of see it as like, oh, okay, this can be our home base, and we can jump off to like other countries in the region. So it allows us to do that. But at the same time, it's also like, okay, who looks after this house? Who, if we're leaving during hurricane season, who's going to like board up for us if we need to, right? Yeah. When we're not there. So there's stuff like that, right? That just kind of like, it has
again, to my wife's credit, I was like, we got to buy something somewhere. We need a property, even if we just rent it out. And she's like, no, we don't. Let's just take a moment. And I'm like, you're right. So
did you guys, if you don't mind me asking,
I understand the impulse.
If you don't mind me asking, do you have a home still in the U.S. then, or did you guys?
No, we sold our home in Boulder in May 30th, and then we spent basically a month getting everything kind of sorted out. Like the first week of June, we came here to Baja Sur because, believe it or not, my wife had never been here. So I show her around. I'm like, here's where we're living for the next 6 months. She's like, okay, cool. We go home and do we both had gum surgery. Like we had all this awful stuff you have to take care of that, if you don't have a provider or a dentist or whatever. And then, had all the dinners with family and kids and just took care of everything that needed to be done in 3 weeks, living out a hotel room. And then we relocated here. But again, it's only till the end of the year, and then we'll move on.
Right on. Yeah, no, that's definitely like a option, right, for people to consider. Just a lot of people do that here. They sell everything back in their home country and come to Belize. Like most of the people that we know, regardless of like age, like a lot of young people obviously kind of have to do it. But then like the retirement age people, like a lot of them still do. They just like liquidate everything back home and come here and kind of dump it all in. Which, again, it does have its issues at times, right? There's a lot of turnover here. So people do that and then kind of regret it and end up leaving. They build a house and then like they don't like it here and they leave. So there's lots of properties for sale and stuff. And so it's something to consider for sure, right? And definitely like I think your approach, which is like what most of the Belize Facebook groups and stuff will tell you, like calm down and spend a year. But at the same time, it's like also maybe that's not always possible. Like that wasn't possible for us. We had 2 young kids to like kind of and dogs, and to like make that move. It's kind of like it's kind of got to be a permanent one to some degree, right? Because like the amount of work just to do that, right? So,
did you ship all your stuff down there?
Yeah, well, not all of it. I mean, we sold a ton of it, but we did purchase like a 20-foot shipping container and loaded that up and brought it down here.
Yeah, there's a lot of people here in Baja who do the same thing. They've got companies that specialize in shipping from the United States, so it's definitely an option.
So the last of your pillagers is Timeline Rebellion. And for me, like, well, I shouldn't say for me, but I can understand how somebody might be like worried, right, about the timeline and about making a big change like this midlife, and their fears that something like this might set them back, financially, professionally, even like socially. Like, what's one thing you tell people to like kind of get them over that hump of those fears?
Well, it's like, what are you working for? We've grown up with what I call the retirement myth of the golden years retirement, where you sacrifice and you work and you do stuff you hate so that when you're 65, you can enjoy life. And now it turns out that's probably not going to happen. Statistically, most retirees watch TV and worry that they're going to run out of money. That is not a good life in my book at all.
No.
So timeline rebellion is simply quit thinking about retirement and start thinking about what can I do in the next couple of years. Now, again, this is before the current situation in the United States where everything feels much more urgent. But, it's like, if you don't think you're going to have enough money to retire and you're going to have to keep working, wouldn't you rather work on terms that you control? Because the real alternative here is odds are you're going to get laid off after 55 and you're going to be long-term unemployed. And that is horrible. And it depletes all your savings. So now you've got even less retirement savings. To me, it's a very practical, logical thing. It's not living the dream, although it feels like living a dream if you pull it off. But, I don't see a lot of real alternative solutions to the current situation other than employers realizing, oh, our ageism is stupid. These are our best people. They may be more expensive, but we should continue paying them. Now, does that sound like the United States corporate mentality to you? It should be, but
Yeah.
it's not.
Especially with the age of AI, where you can actually automate all the entry level positions, then it would be make
exactly
more sense to
you keep the wisdom and you automate. Now that's a bad sign for my kids, but I'm just looking at this from a logical standpoint, and it just seems that the companies are always so short-sighted. It's so easy to immediately cut overhead by dropping a bunch of older people's salaries and then trying to figure it out. And there's just this preference for youth that ironically started with the baby boomers, right? And youth culture was born about the time that they came along. And that's when we became obsessed with youth and young people and young things. And brand advertising was always aimed at young people, get them to be customers when they're young. Now it turns out Gen Z has no money and no loyalty. The people who have the money and who would be brand loyal are being ignored, which are those very same baby boomers and older Gen Xers, right? But here's the thing. Older consumers will punish you if you portray them as old fools or ignore them completely. And that's why you're seeing startups come along like Caddis Eyewear. They basically sell hip glasses like Warby Parker, but specifically to older people because older people like hip glasses too, right? It's just all these silly misconceptions and stereotypes, and they're killing it, right? So there's a lot of opportunity. We could talk a whole nother show about just the 50 plus market, but really I'm really trying to reach 50 plus people first and say you got to take control of your situation, and the idea that we are our own market is also a fascinating aspect of what I'll be talking about it further.
Shifting gears a bit then to your world travels. So you said 2018. I always, this is kind of one of the purposes of the podcast too. Is just, travel is such a great educator and kind of equalizer. And what's one perspective that you've gained from, your travels that you think every American should hear?
Oof, I'll probably get in trouble with this. I just don't find the United States to be a very interesting place compared to almost everywhere else. But when you're in the United States and you have this ultra convenience and hyper consumerism. And that's really what we do. That is, we work and we buy. And then we seek convenience so we can work more, so we can buy more. It's like the speeches in Fight Club made an impression on everyone in this generation. But it's true. And then even before my daughter was born in 2002. My son was born in 2005. They were both in Europe traveling with us as infants. They've grown up traveling, something my wife and I didn't have the privilege to do. So that was always important, to show them the rest of the world that this may not even be normal, even though the United States is, regarded by some as the greatest country in the world and all this kind of stuff. Now, it's the greatest military power in the world. We know that much. But just like, the European lifestyle, like they actually live, right? Now, and then you'll have Americans who criticize Europeans because they're not as innovative and they don't work as hard, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, look at the value judgments there, and I really think that you're starting to see more Americans go, yeah, why? What does it matter if we have all this and I'm not happy, right? And there's no meaning in my life and I don't enjoy it. But the same thing in Latin American countries, much more family oriented, much more communal, in the sense that people look after each other a little bit more. In the United States, it's rugged individualism. You got to go it alone. It's cutthroat competition. It's just not a healthy environment at all. But it's just like a fish in water. That's the environment you're in. You just kind of take it for granted. So in my travels, I've just gained the perspective, at least for me personally, that I would much rather be in so many other places, because it's fascinating and I'm learning and I'm meeting interesting new people. I'm understanding another culture. And I understand that there is many viable alternatives to the American way, right? The American lifestyle. My only complaint about Australia was it was too much like the United States, except you don't worry about getting shot because there's no guns.
Just bitten by
That
a
was a big
poisonous
one.
snake.
Yeah, definitely critters will kill you there. You just got to watch out. Don't be in the bush,
Yeah.
But otherwise, Sydney, Melbourne, the Gold Coast, it's lovely, lovely people, amazing, but they're definitely trying to be America. I'm like, you don't need to do
Interesting.
that. France, definitely not trying to be America. New Zealand, less than Australia. These were the places that I went with my family, and we stayed 3 months each place. But now I just want to dig in deeper to just multiple places, and hopefully, we'll find a place that we want to call home. But in the meantime, we're in no hurry.
Yeah, no, and I think that's important too, right? Is to not put that pressure on yourself. Just take your time with things. When we moved here to Belize, we definitely I don't know, I don't want to say did it in a hurry, but it seemed like a lot all at once, and it was I don't know, in hindsight it was
sometimes that's how you get things done, right? You just go all in and
yeah.
Can't turn back now.
No, and we don't want to. We would never it definitely coming to Belize, but had its challenges and stuff, and again, changing careers. I unfortunately didn't take that time ahead to start to build a new career. I definitely was just I don't know what I'm going to do after I move, and and I figured it out, but it was definitely a painful period of adjustment. But it's if you can take the time, thoughtful adaptation, requires a bit of time. So what's one small thing that listeners can do, say, this week to start start their adaptation?
Yeah, I think we found a theme of our conversation today, and which is, if you can, and I think most people can, start to plan before you leap, and that can be done a little bit each day. But I think it really comes down to listing your objectives. It's a common goal for people to want to start a business. What would that look like for you? Is it something that's portable or location independent? If so, start thinking, what would it take for me to slowly ramp this up while I've got a paycheck, while I've got stability, and I'm not stressed out? And then, because without the business, the relocation becomes more difficult, as we discussed. It's not that you can't move to another country, it's that you need to be able to make a living. If you've got some savings, you could do it. It sounds like you had some savings and you made the jump, and then you got ramped up with your new business. That is an option. I mean, it sounds like heresy, but if you don't have enough to retire on, but you have some savings, using that savings to create an environment that you can thrive in with a business in a new location that's less expensive, with better healthcare and all that. I mean, you got to use that money for something. So I'm not advocating for people to raid their retirement savings, but I'm just saying, if it's not enough to retire and you're worried about getting laid off or replaced by AI, what are you going to use that money for? Because it's not going to work for its intended course. So that's probably the most radical thing I'll say today. But you save that money, and you've got to be able to do something with it that betters your life, because the old playbook, which is the other theme, is out the window.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then and another thing too, I would say, is like just kind of linking back into that, is a lot of like countries will, it's kind of required, like, for you to have a job or to show that income. Like,
yeah, you got to show that. Exactly.
Yeah, here in Belize. So like, that's something that people should for sure look, if if for example, you don't have that job yet, then you're going to still have to show like how you're supporting yourself, right? So you're going to have to show that savings, where the money's coming from. And in certain places like Belize, they want to see like, oh, you made this deposit, and sometimes they want like a paper trail. They want to see like, oh, you sold this stock and made this amount, this profit, and that's what you're using. They want to see that sometimes. So that's just.
And the other thing to take into account is countries that actually are welcoming versus countries who don't want you to come. For example, Costa Rica will allow you to deposit $60,000 in a Costa Rican bank, and then they disperse it to you. And that's the minimum amount required to get residency. So that's not an astronomical sum, and they're giving it back to you, right? They just want to make sure that it's there, so you're not destitute in Costa Rica, right? So there are countries that are very welcoming and have very reasonable residency requirements. And there are other countries who don't need you, and so they make it more difficult, right? And again, a lot of times the countries that don't require you to learn a new language are the hardest countries to get residency in. They make it more difficult. So
Yeah.
You gotta do your research. Listening to your work is going to give a lot of people some guidance, right? Read further if you're in my age group and you're looking more for, how do I fix this problem? That's what we talk about.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I think we're kind of getting close to the full time. So, but I think, that's pretty good. I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. So thank you so much for coming on. I know you just mentioned further, but where can people find you and find more about Further?
Yeah, so the main website is actually at further.net. It is on Substack, but that's the main website, and you can get a feel for it and sign up for the free newsletter there. The Substack is technically news.further.net if you want to go directly there, but either way, will get you to the free newsletter. We have this introductory guide. I think it's 5 parts. It goes into detail, great detail, of the elements that we just talked about kind of here today. So if that was intriguing to you and want to find out more, at minimum, you can just sign up for that and grab those initial documents and go from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. It was a pleasure chatting with you and meeting you. And thanks again for coming on and sharing your knowledge and experience. And have a great rest of your trip or time in Mexico. And thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck with everything. I'll be following your Belize adventures because it's pretty awesome. You're a couple decades ahead, and that's awesome.
Yeah, well, we were trying to do something different. We wanted to.
Yep.
That script wasn't suiting us, and we wanted to do something else, so we took a leap. But and we'll see. So far, it seems to be paying off.
Yeah, awesome.
So, yeah. All righty.
All right.
Awesome.
Take care.
Take
everyone.
it easy. Bye.